right, everybody who flew in, jet lag is starting to kick in a bit. Some of that lunch is settling in, so I see a couple of tired faces in the audience, but the panel has promised that we will keep it interesting and controversial statements only. So hopefully this will be an interesting discussion on AV technology now and in the future. So with all of the recent news cycle concerning companies working on level 4 technology, there's been a lot of debate about where is the industry going. And so today on the panel, we're going to focus on hearing thoughts from our experts here on the current state of the industry, what are the learnings from the journey so far, and where is this industry going, as well as lessons for other automotive applications. In terms of this panel, I'm particularly excited about the folks here for a couple of reasons. One is, as you'll hear in their backgrounds, they all come from a mix of both level 4 technology as well as having worked on traditional automotive and ADAS. And the other part is we have a fantastic mix of folks. So we have folks working in-house at OEMs working on this technology, as well as independent companies, and a diversity of applications. So with that, let's kick off some introductions. I'll get this started. My name is Vijay. I lead the product team at Applied. Prior to Applied, worked at Waymo for almost 5 years, both on the robotaxi application as well as the autonomous trucking application.
Hey everyone, this is Apeksha. I'm one of the co-founders and chief engineer at Gatik. I come from a more of learning-based background, robotics background, spent years working in the industry on different kinds of platforms, both indoor, outdoor navigations. Worked with Ford for a while on their self-driving platform, and then started the company with my other two co-founders back in 2017, focusing on business to business, B2B short haul, middle mile use case for developing and deploying autonomous technology.
Hi, my name is CJ King. I'm the Chief Engineering Officer for Torc Robotics, and my background comes from a long line of automotive, Ford, Toyota, working on that space, a little bit of technology mixed in there with Amazon, and coming over to really focus on driving hub to hub and what are we doing with level 4 and how do we do that in Class 8 trucking.
Hi everyone, Andreas Johansson from Scania. I have 17 years at Scania. That's probably not a merit in the Bay Area. I haven't understood this this week, but at Scania it's kind of good to have been working at the same company for many years. I've been working with ADAS a lot of years, but since 2017 I'm heading the development for confined areas and mining applications for autonomous vehicles at Scania.
Hey everyone, Akshay Jaising. I lead our commercialization efforts at Motional. My background's in automotive. I spent 12 years at General Motors, so close to 17, but short. And then I joined Waymo for a bit. I've been leading business development strategy for the most part at those companies. Then I joined an eVTOL company that didn't quite take off, and that's why I'm back on the ground now.
All right, let's jump into the panel. So first question, what is level 4 technology? I've scratched that. I think we're all familiar with what level 4 applications are, so their goal in the panel is to kind of go beyond what you hear in the news and get into some of the deeper insights. But not to start on a gloomy note, but the level 4 industry has been facing some challenges. I think you've all heard the news around Argo, Too Simple, Aurora, Cruise, and so forth, and that's after tens of billions of dollars have been invested in the industry. So maybe starting off with thinking about, what has led to the current state of the industry, and what can we learn from the journey so far? So maybe CJ, you can kick us off here.
Yes, I think I would look at this two ways. One is customers and the consumer, the general public. What are they looking at? What do they understand about L4? And I think that's some of the pain points that we've seen, the lack of understanding, the awareness. How do you connect that? So if you think back to ABS brakes, no one wanted to hold their foot down, let it go and impulse and give that input to them. It was unnatural, it was new. How do we teach the consumer and how do we connect them to understand L4 is actually safer, more efficient, and actually will be an opportunity for us to save lives and really deliver on something. And then on the opposite side is, it's a really hard problem to solve and replace a human driving a vehicle. In our case, a Class 8 truck, which is up to 80 tons, driving down the road at all different speeds. So how do we focus and deliver that? I think that's why there's been some longevity issues around investment and doing the right thing, solving the right problem. But those are two of the areas that I would kind of think that are lessons learned for us to move forward as an industry.
Yeah, and Akshay, maybe you're looking at it from the commercialization angle. How do you characterize the state of the industry? What are sort of the lessons for you?
Yeah, I think CJ hit it, that it's a very hard problem. We've all seen this. It's taking a lot longer to commercialize and scale the technology. The reality with L4 today is you have a less capable vehicle that's more expensive, right? And you need to move the needle on both fronts. It's not just the technology, but it's also on the cost. And that's taking a lot longer than any of us anticipated, which means your investor base has to be pretty well calibrated with that extended timeline. And that's where we are seeing a lot of challenges, some level of industry consolidation, which is resulting to some of the events that you highlighted.
Yeah, it's an interesting point. Like, whenever the discussion about level 4 technology comes about, often it's about the technology itself and less so about the cost point that you mentioned. So, people will say, okay, Cruise and Waymo are operating robotaxis in San Francisco. Are we there and can we scale it out? But there is a big aspect of, can you do it at a profitable level or not? And will consumers be willing to pay the price of each ride or not? And do you think the industry has historically just underestimated the cost angle? And maybe a question for the other panelists as well is, what's the hard technology challenge in solving that cost problem?
Yeah, probably I can take that. So from our perspective, like looking back in 2015, 2014, there were a lot of promises being made that we'll be seeing the technology commercialized on the public road. In 2019, 2020, that was recalibrated to 2023, 2024. And now we are hearing it in 25, 26, 27. So for some reason, it's always 5 years out. I think the way, one of the key things that we essentially had an insight when we started Gatik was the technology is going to be like a real-time application of the technology and being able to understand what is going to be required to commercialize in a way that it's something that the customers truly value and can create a near-term value for the customer itself. So I think looking at the insights as shared by the other panelists, it is something that requires a thought around like how do you form, how do you structure, how do you constrain that problem in a way that it makes the application feasible in the near term and be able to also deploy it to the market where the customer essentially sees the value proposition. For us, in the B2B mid-mile use case, one of the things that we have seen from the customer side is the customer base is actually very educated. They have spent years actually having conversations with different OEMs, different players in the industry, and they recognize what are the technical challenges here. But the pain point itself is so huge when we look at the growing B2B e-commerce backbone. The pain point is so huge that they are ready to invest in that technological development. They are ready to partner with you to actually grow that technology and bring that to the market. And this is something that we have been able to validate with our customers. We have been live with them since 2019. A lot of customers, we are expanding with them now. For this particular use, we have been the only company actually in the industry that has been able to deliver on the commercialization aspect of the technology and are able to scale it with our customers and growing them, seeing things through on the productization of the technology.
Yeah, so that's in contrast to the approach where you work on the R&D, get the technology ready, and then find the sort of apply the business case, and you went backwards at it. And
yeah, so I think it was like when we started Gatik, I think it was a very different time in the. So if you look back, go a decade or more ago, at that time, the technology was the centerpiece. Like everyone was so much caught up with the fact that if the technology is solved, then all use cases are going to be equal, right? Like you can go, you can do logistics, you can do robo-taxis or things like that. So the technology was the centerpiece in terms of like finding solution and then building a business around it. But what we have learned over the years is it matters. Like what kind of system are you trying to build? What kind of use case are you trying to build? At a systems level, it's a different problem. So honing down what that niche is and then growing broad from there, first capturing that niche and then growing broad from them, there is something that matters specifically for a new frontier technology like this.
Yeah, and going from sort of technology first to business first has definitely been one of the themes over the past couple of years for the level 4 industry. There has been a lot of positive progress as well. So I'm just curious to hear, and maybe Andreas start us off on this one. What's a recent development that you've been very excited about?
Well, in terms of where I'm putting most of my efforts in mining applications, it's actually been the deep contact and the interactions with our customers and the domain to really feed in the end customer perspectives into our solutions. It's heavily integrated with the customer and the customer sites and the different applications within the mine. So it's not just about solving the problem for autonomous vehicles and autonomous driving. Is also about integrating all our systems into a new ecosystem that's been really exciting on a personal note for me.
Yeah. Akshay, what are you excited about?
Yeah, on our side, so we've been operating a robotaxi service with the safety operator since 2018. It actually started off at CES offering rides on the Lyft platform. We've come a long way. So now we're on a second generation platform. It's a Hyundai Ioniq 5 robotaxi. We've been operating on the strip on both the Uber and the Lyft network. This year is a pivotal year for us as we work towards removing the driver from the vehicle. So even though the car's been operating autonomously, obviously we've had a safety operator. So it's that 0 to 1 phase that is really critical. And that's what the entire company is charged towards this year. So looking forward to that milestone at the end of this quarter. And once we're able to hit that, then it's about consolidating that foundation and thoughtfully scaling up. So that's what we're looking forward to.
That sounds great. All right, let's, on that note, maybe start, do a look ahead of what's coming next in the industry. So, CJ, I'm going to call you on for this one. What's your counterintuitive, half-crazy prediction for the next 5 years?
So this is a good question that you put me on the spot first. So counterintuitive, I think what we see it as today is not going to be what it is tomorrow. 5 years from now, think about where we were 5 years ago and where we're at. Everyone was going to go L4. We were going to have robo-taxis everywhere, whether in San Francisco or Vegas. Everyone was going to be everywhere, and we were going to be able to send our kids in an L4. What I think now is we're seeing other things come to fruition, generative AI or other technologies that are coming into the ecosystem, new manufacturing solutions, new partnerships, new sensors, all of that's coming in and changing. So 5 years from now, it will be a dramatically different view on where we're at. And I think we'll start to accomplish a lot more of what the general public think of as robo vehicles, whether it's trucking, whether it's taxi. So in 5 years, not to be a pun, I think we will actually realize some mass adoption of this technology in real world scenarios.
We made it 17 minutes into the conversation without saying Gen AI, so now we have to talk about it. Where are you seeing applications of Gen AI, either immediately or a couple of years down the line as it relates to level 4 technology?
I think most immediately is going to be in the synthetic data creation and scenario basis for us to solve all the edge cases around our ODDs and where we're operating, what we're doing. But generative AI is going to give us an example or an opportunity to even accelerate where we pull data in and how we generate that synthetic data that can be built into simulation for one, some of our on-road use cases, and then really driving in those safety expectations around it. So that I think that's the foremost start to generative AI in this space.
Yeah, let's get some more predictions. Apeksha, what's your counterintuitive, crazy prediction?
Yeah, I think looking at the 5 to 10 years horizon, I think it's going to be, this is something that I've shared with the applied team before as well. Like I think it's going to be at least till the end of the decade before we see the mass productization of vehicles that can do the B2C sort of like frameworks where you have anywhere to anywhere kind of like use case, even within a geofenced area. I think there are newer technologies and tools coming to the market. However, at the end of the day, the question boils down to, at least for the AV industry, like AD systems, it boils down to validations. And being able to validate the systems across a certain domain of deployment. And that has been one of the key gating factors for a lot of applications that are more broader in terms of their deployment area. One of the things that I truly believe in for the next 5 to 10 years is the kind of use cases that see the approach of incremental development and deployment. This has been one of the key theses at Gatik, is like understanding what kind of domains you can address first, what kind of, so we essentially do known routes use case, so our vehicles essentially move between B2B, business to business, retailers, distribution centers, warehouses, and we move goods between these known points, known centers for our customers, and it allows a kind of like a structure as well as priors and the information around what routes are we going to be driving upon, what routes can be prioritized over others, and all these kinds of things that allows us to have a mentality of incremental development and deployment. That's kind of reduces the kind of like validations that you have to go through, and hence enables, like this has been one of the things that has enabled us to go to market much sooner than a lot of our peers with a lot more resources than what we have. And we have been leading our way in the commercialization aspect of our technology across the market. So one of the key things that I think is going to help out over the next at least like 5 to 10 years, like horizon, is having that kind of mindset towards incremental development and deployment that reduces or that at least like allows you some form of discount in the terms of like amount of validations that you would have to do if you were waiting for that 0 to 1 kind of like switch for a certain area or certain cities. I think for the more broader or mass deployments kind of use cases like robotaxis or things like that, I think one of the things that like we see Waymos and Cruise right now deployed in San Francisco, and we are seeing them expand, at least like we are hearing them expand to other cities as well. One of the key things that's going to be determining the commercialization aspect of these use cases is being able to deploy it at meaningful scale. So the way I think about it is like 50 to 100 cities across North America with services at par of Uber or Lyft, where you can truly drive the revenue. That's something that's going to take some time before you are able to validate your systems to be able to achieve those things. So I think that's one of the things that might benefit developers of this technology to change the approach in terms of like how do you drive revenue, how do you drive your business while working towards the technology.
Other predictions?
Well, I don't know if it's mind-blowing, but I think we will see a shift, at least more of a balance towards also the trucking industry. It's not just my wishes. I truly believe so. I mean, the business cases are really there for haulage between hubs, for commercial vehicles, and also the problem is it's easier to solve than going into urban traffic and robotaxis. So I think and hope and believe that we will put even more efforts into getting trucks on our highways and freeways, both in Europe and US, and of course the rest of the world.
Yeah, for a while it seemed to be a shrinking industry, but with maybe Stack AV raising some funding, that'll be new impetus. Akshay, predictions from your side?
Yeah, whatever I say, I know I'm going to be wrong. But I think if you look at it a few years back, there was a lot of skepticism. Can you have self-driving cars, right? Like, is it really going to happen? And today we are sitting here, and there's actually self-driving cars in San Francisco. Granted, it's not trouble-free, right? They make headlines almost every day, but I think that's good. If they're really pushing the envelope, so it's something to be excited about. If you were doing nothing, nothing would happen, right? So because they're pushing the envelope, they're seeing problems, and to me, that's interesting. That means they're really trying hard, and it's pushing the industry forward. I think self-driving cars and human drivers are going to coexist for a while. I don't think it's going to be a future in 5-10 years where you see only AVs on the road. But I do think AVs will probably take a stronghold in certain markets, on certain limited geographies where there's positive unit economics, right? Today, if you don't have, I know the hardest problem everyone's trying to solve is the technology, but it really comes down to the customer experience as well as the unit economics that will allow you to scale. You can't be, burning through cash to scale, which is where a lot of companies are today. So that flip will happen once the technology cost comes down, which is what I'm predicting in the next 5 years.
All right, so technology costs coming down to make it a profitable business. I think that's necessary for the industry to happen. So almost you have to will that into being a reality. That makes sense. Thank you for sharing that. So let's go towards comparing a little bit with the ADAS industry. So I think a lot of the folks in the audience work on level 2 plus, level 3 systems. And so an interesting question to ask here is, what can ADAS development teams learn from level 4 development approaches?
Well, I think quite a lot, actually. And I think, we have seen many examples of that today also about the future, about the safety functions and the necessity for that. And I think the AV development will for many people show what can be done with our autonomous systems. And I believe that will push also legislation and regulations towards ADAS development. So as soon as we see what can be done with our high-end AV systems, that will push legislation and regulation towards ADAS also, and also sort of be a catalyst for bringing many of the traditional OEMs towards more of a software-centric company, because that will be needed to meet those requirements.
Yeah, CJ, you were at Toyota, then Ford, and now working on level 4 at Torc. What do you think, if you were, with the knowledge you have now, working back on ADAS development, what would you do differently?
So if you look at it, they've always had separate teams and organizations. They've never put ADAS and L4 vehicle systems together. They've always been two completely independent ones. And I think if you start to merge them together and start to ask different questions, L4 is always looking on what don't we know, how do we solve the next edge case, where are we going? There's a lot of unknown unknowns that we're trying to get to as fast as we can to rein in that ODD that allows us to go to market, whereas most L2 systems set and start with a pretty defined use case, it's contained. They'll start to, if they start getting more comfortable reaching to the next and the next and the unknown, it will really start to show an advancement in the ADAS systems that, as Andreas mentioned, are just going to take leverage. And there's an ecosystem in L4 now that allows that to fall back into L2, L2++ was mentioned earlier, L3, as they start to migrate towards a full L4 autonomy stack without a driver. But all those technologies are built to save lives, so why not bring them back into the ADAS faster? So really the process to push the boundaries and bring that back into general production.
Yeah, like what would you say is like one specific example of, hey, I would do data collection and mining differently, or is it would use more synthetic data, or would use more simulation, something else? Just maybe help us contextualize with an example.
So yeah, it's probably not just the data mining, because a lot of them are doing data mining, so that's traditionally where map making and all that gets their data from. I think it's really on the simulation side, pushing out the edge cases and really understanding what the capabilities are to start safety certifying those. So what are the new scenarios, use cases you can test your current ADAS stack in that open up a new opportunity for you with either with no change in some situations or a small change or iterative change to your current stack. As there's higher level of sensors going onto the vehicles, whether it's a higher level radar, camera, some are now putting LiDAR into all their systems, that's going to allow a natural progression into a more advanced ADAS stack.
Apeksha, thoughts on what can ADAS learn from level 4, and maybe similar question, which is what's a specific thing that you would actually change if you were working on an ADAS program right now?
Absolutely. I think I think it's going to be a little bit more from an insight standpoint. One of the things that I've learned, and I think a lot of industry is now realizing this as well, is the path to L4 is not through L2 or L3. Like, these systems are inherently, like, at a systems level, it's a different problem. You're working with, on L2, L3 side, you're working with the assumption that there's someone in the driving seat and there to be the fallback, whereas L4, you're essentially like thinking about these system level overall like architectures where you need to have a ground up approach in terms of understanding what are the things that you need in the system and you don't. I think the two things that I feel that are relevant and can be drawn from what L4 we have been seeing as a widely accepted thing within the L4 is sensor modalities. I think one of the things on the ADAS side is it has been quite camera heavy so far. There is a lot of like value for advanced features to have more redundant modalities and complementary modalities as well within the systems that have helped us accelerate and also increase the safety aspects within the domains. The other thing which has been very specific to Gatik and how we have approached our use cases around being able to start small or start from a very niche use case that allows those kinds of safety validations, which is having some sort of like structured or priors from your environment, some form of known route use case. One example that we have discussed, I have discussed with some of my peers in ADAS industry that makes sense. For example, if there was features of around like home to office or office to home, which are like the known route use cases where you drive a lot of data from certain routes that the user or consumer essentially does every day, where you could have more higher guarantees or confidence around what are some of the things in the environment, anomalies and those kinds of things that we utilize within our use cases. For L4, I think those are some of the things that can push the boundaries of what ADAS can do, what ADAS can actually safely certify that this is something that a feature, even though advanced, can be released to the broader mass consumer market.
Yeah, and the vice versa question is also worth asking, which is, the ADAS industry today ships millions of cars. These are deployed and saving lives today. What does the level 4 industry learn from ADAS and should sort of change, or what is one thing that you can embody and change right away?
Yeah, I think from my perspective, it's a little bit more cultural as well, right? Like if you look at OEMs, tier ones, take a step back, right? Product development is performance, cost, and timing. And all the typical OEMs and tier ones are hyper-focused on cost, hyper-focused on timing, right? And if something has to give, they'll be okay with some performance, shortcuts, I would say. But on the L4 side, it's the other way around, right? Like everyone's hyper-focused on performance, and it's almost like cost is not a barrier, right? Timing, let it take the time it does. We just had the conversation on L4 overall. I think that mindset is really important, like to learn about actually productionizing a technology and taking it to market. There's a lot of learning there that the L4 industry can learn from the ADAS world.
I think that's really interesting because I really think you need that proper balance. I mean, for quite a while you need to be really tech focused, and it's about the timing to find the proper timing, not to do it too fast, going into sort of commercialization, because that we might end up in an old tech when it reaches our customers. So it's about the balance. Yeah?
Absolutely. It's about the balance. I just think it's very skewed in opposite directions right now.
Right.
CJ, seeing you nod to some of those comments. What are your thoughts here?
Yeah, usually when you get to a conversation about L4 versus ADAS, it's usually the technology space that we're discussing. So as they're bringing in the other components of business, how do you productionize it? How do you maintain it? What's the robustness and requirements you do around your safety certification or regulations? I think those are all, that's really what L2 ADAS has done really well, because they've got out to market and mass produce across all the vehicle lines and OEMs to get us into that space where consumers can safely use it and understand it. So they've educated, they've brought them along for the journey, they've been able to connect all the dots around cost effectiveness, performance, really how that technology stack adds into that. So L4 has purely always been what is the technology and how do we solve the root problem, but we haven't always brought back in the business case, the training, the maintenance, all that. So I think that's
Why is that?
because everyone was after solving the biggest problem, hardest problem is to remove a human. So first starting there to say that it's doable, and I think that we're past that it's doable, and now a lot of the companies that are here and have path to production have turned from just solving the problem and actually going to market and how are we going to make money and solve this in a safe, reliable, robust way that delivers a product that's sustainable.
And do you think because of, some companies will make that shift, some companies won't be able to make that shift, does the landscape of level 4 technology and the companies working on it look very different 5-7 years from now versus today? And part of the question is who's going to continue funding this for how long? Part of the question is who's going to actually be able to make that shift and get, show up path through profitability, if not profitability. So just curious to get opinions. Does the landscape of companies in the space look very different? And are they independent companies? Are they OEM sort of in-house efforts?
I mean, the landscape's going to change. It's changed over the past 3 to 5 years already. Even in the last 12 months, we're different. I think all of the above will happen. I think some OEM sponsored, some independents will work. I think there's an opportunity to solve, and it goes back to what business problem are you actually solving, and how do you connect that to your use case, and how do you deliver that product? So I don't know where we'll be in 5 to 7 years on which companies will still be here or what names we've changed to or not, but it's going to change, and that's part of solving a hard, difficult problem that's effectively changing an ecosystem and allowing us to have a different path to success and safety.
And Akshay, you're thinking of it from a commercialization perspective. I mean, capital allocation, who do you think is going to continue to fund these efforts for the time it takes to get to a profitable state?
Yeah, I think that's a really tough question, right? Like everybody's trying to, the most important piece here is it does look like it's going to be more strategic investors, right? Investors who are looking at this as a long game with a strategic benefit, which puts OEMs in a position to start thinking about, hey, should we double up on our investments in this space? Also thinking of how this technology could transition for personal car ownership, right? So we may see more of that happening.
All right, with keeping an eye on the clock, just want to switch to maybe slightly more technical questions here. So a lot of the audience here is, of course, engineering focused. So we've talked a lot about how the industry needs to make a shift towards thinking about the business and having use cases that make business sense and then validating against those narrower use cases maybe rather than sort of boiling the ocean. But would love to sort of talk about each of the applications you're working on. The audience may not actually be familiar with, so maybe give us a quick overview of, okay, what's the application you're focused on and what's the biggest technical challenge you're facing, just from a pure technology standpoint. Could be the introductions of new machine learned techniques are necessary in order to drive in the environments you're driving. Could be some of the things that CJ touched on in terms of how to use generative AI. Could be safety validation. But if you had to describe sort of one big technical challenge and how you're going about solving that.
Sounds good. So with Gatik, we have been essentially focused on delivering on the autonomy technology for B2B use case. So this is essentially think about these as the back end of the consumer behavior that we are seeing across the e-commerce, across the retail industry, where you have an expectation of consumers essentially have an expectation of having their goods when they place orders on their phones or online for their orders to be delivered same day or next day. That's kind of like compressing the timelines, which the traditional delivery supply chain backbones were originally built to have inventory replenishments or deliveries happen once every week or twice every week. However, with these kinds of like shrinking timelines on the delivery expectations from consumers, what we are seeing is a huge stress on that backbone of the industry. And that's where we are seeing the majority of the pain points from most of our customers. So Gatik, we have been essentially like working with about 9+ Fortune 500 customers in the retail and e-commerce space, spread across 5 different markets: Dallas, San Antonio, Toronto, and a few more. We have been doing these deliveries for several years now with our customers, and we were one of the first companies actually across the world to have done driver-out deliveries for our customers back in 2021, and then expanding it. This was back in 2021 with Walmart in Arkansas, and then having repeated that in Toronto last year. So with those kinds of things, what we are essentially like gearing towards is, from a technical standpoint, we are at a point where we are able to scale up. We have the kind of, I would say, market validation with our customers. We have the kind of technical validations with our deployments that we have seen till date. So the next big milestone for us is essentially being able to meaningfully scale the freight only, which is driver out for us, freight only solutions across several different routes. That's what the team is geared up towards.
And what's the challenge in pulling the driver out? What's stopping you from doing that?
So I think it's less about like the kind of, and this is where the incremental development and deployment mentality comes into picture. There are certain kinds of features, there are kinds of domains that we have already validated, and what we are geared up towards is expanding of those features and domains. So this is what is one of the key advantages of the hypothesis, the technical approach that we have taken. I think the place where the technical challenges come into picture is more from the platform side. So one of the key things that basically we started with class 3 platforms. These are like smaller box trucks back in 2019. As we are seeing the use cases, as we are growing the market expansion, we are seeing the use cases drive into class 3, class 4, all the way up to class 7. So we recently announced our deployments with Tyson. This is where we are essentially disrupting the class 8 market using the class 6 and class 7 vehicles. And this is when we essentially go through these different kinds of classes of vehicles and different kinds of use case, one of the things that gets quite overlooked is the payloads on these kinds of vehicles. So the varying payloads and vehicle dynamics essentially between these kinds of different kinds of vehicles also affect the kind of performances and reliabilities, that safety metrics that you're also focused towards. One of the things that we have essentially done quite early on is we are partnered with Goodyear. They are one of the investors as well as partner of Gatik, and we have been working with them for over a year now on essentially building up technologies that allow us to be more robust, more reliable across the different kinds of platforms that we are working with.
That's interesting. And we talked about ADAS comparison. ADAS almost has to deploy across vehicle variants from day one or scale up pretty quickly. But on L4, it does take a lot more effort today to go, especially across sort of class 3, 4, 5.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's very interesting on that front is being able to advance these like smaller subsystems that we have been like thinking. So tires are it's very difficult to think, but it's the component that touches the road, right? Like you have so much of data coming in from that interface, and there are a lot of like advanced systems that you can actually like build out of it around inclement weathers, around reliabilities, around stopping distances and things like that.
Makes sense. Other big technical challenges that you're focused on solving?
Yeah, I think to go a little bit farther, because we're in Class 8 trucking, and I think regulatory, solving how you do that, because as you start to cross state lines, country lines, all those boundaries start to add in different complexity about how humans actually interact with the vehicle. How do you handle an inspection? How do you handle a remote vehicle assistance or any of that around regulatory? So that interface and that human touch to the vehicle, how do you safely deploy it from a hub to hub? Those are technical challenges that nobody's really gone after yet, because most of it's been focused on just the driving part, but not the operation of that network. So say you launch a truck and no one touches it for 1,000 miles. There's 3 days of opportunity for humans to be able to inspect it, do payload validation, pull off for truck weight, all of that. and you have to be able to provide all the documentation, all the legality. So connecting that into an automated system that allows you to dynamically set, as she was mentioning, around the weight, the pin location of a trailer and hitch, how does that actually connect, whether it's a reefer, which is cooled, so you're actually having to keep something cold, temperature controlled, or just a standard box, or if it's a flatbed, how does that change all the dynamics? How does that allow you? So the configurability of those types of things are really a larger impact than to a robotaxi, because you're actively looking at regulation in that space. That's different.
Those sound like sort of what you would say engineering problems rather than science, invention, or developing, coming up with new systems or approaches, right? So is it just a matter of taking the time and doing it, or is there some big hurdle that makes it challenging?
I don't think there's a technical hurdle to it, but actually getting it commonized so you can launch a product that allows every state, every legislation to support it. Because right now they're wildly different. There's been some stuff happening in California versus Texas versus other states, and that changes how you operate in those. So I don't think it's a solvable problem. It's something it's going to go back into a more traditional HMI and human-machine interface, and how that connects into a lot of the IVI systems that we have. But how do you take that and take it out of the vehicle so a police officer or a ranger or somebody can step up and interact with the vehicle in a safe way?
Yeah, and there have been some well-documented incidents of, in San Francisco, the challenges robotaxi have run into interfacing with humans. Other technical challenges that you're focused on, Andreas?
Yeah, maybe another twist on this would be for the mining applications. We put a lot of efforts in integration with our customer systems, and it's going to be really important for us to have an ease of integration moving out when we're scaling this product. So really having a easy and well-defined interface is easy to integrate towards, and really delivering safe and secure product IT into our customers' ecosystems. That is maybe a different challenge towards the onboard driving challenges that we have for autonomous vehicles.
Yeah, it's interesting. This is probably the first sort of panel I'm hearing where it's not about does the truck have the long range enough to have the right perception and detect a vehicle on the shoulder, or can the robotaxi see up and down the hills of San Francisco. A lot of the challenges that you all are highlighting are related to sort of, let's assume those things are solved, and what else is needed to actually go and deploy this. Does that mean the onboard driving software is kind of solved?
Yeah, so I'll probably quickly share some of the things. So we essentially already validated this and have been running like these driver out operations back with Walmart in 21, and then with Loblaws in 22. One of the key learnings that we have had across these kinds of deployments is, if we think about the incremental development and deployment methodology, there is a true roadmap towards being able to deploy this, prioritize the routes with the customers, and so on and so forth. Just to quickly contrast, as compared to Class 8s, the kind of payloads that we work with, Class 3 to Class 6 and probably Class 7, these are quite lower in the kind of GVWR that we are working with. So, as well as the kind of domains that we are working with, these are constrained within the states, mainly around intercities and those kinds of things. So there are things that for this particular use case, the B2B use case, there is a lot of things that are more constrained, structured, and from regulation standpoint, we are well placed. So there are a lot of things that are already solved. If we have that mindset of incremental development and deployment, and being able to actually deploy these vehicles with the customer and validate those things. The challenges are more towards being able to expand this at the scale that where essentially you're looking at expanding the markets, expanding the kind of platforms that we are working with. So not to say that everything is solved, but that's not what we are also in Gatik specifically. That's not the kind of intention here to boil down the entire ocean. We are taking those steps towards the baby steps towards the final, towards the expansion across the markets. But having those incremental steps as well allows us to be a real business, allows us to drive real revenue year over year with the kind of customer base that we are working with.
Yeah, that's a great point, and it's sort of tying it back to the nice framework, Akshay, you had before, saying, hey, it's performance, cost, time. I feel like scale is almost the fourth one, right? Which is even if you can do it in one route, one geography, can you do it at globally to make it a viable business? But going back to the question, is the onboard driving part solved? Everybody's talking about what the sort of last mile problems are.
I would say for the confined areas and for mining that we are working with at Scania, I would say that we are pretty much feature complete. And we have also the luxury to sort of control the environment and control the site. So everything does not need to be handled by the vehicle. We can also use variables on the site and configure the site and remove hazards and remove people, etc. And that gives us a perfect opportunity to introduce sort of the first baseline for our solution and sort of gradually and continuously improve that solution. So that's, I think that is really an advantage for us moving into sort of a commercial phase.
So I would say no. I don't think anyone can say that the entire ODD that we want to do and get to a business model that's sustainable across the entire globe. No, we haven't solved all the virtual driver solution requirements issues. We just don't know all of them. So we've solved enough, I think, is what everyone's saying, to be able to launch a product, and we're getting to operationalize that product and go to market in a space to start making money that then allows us to start solving the next generation. And to go back, you mentioned no one's talked about range or sensor fusion or any of that. And I think that shows the level of maturity in the ecosystem that demonstrates that as a whole, we are that much closer and we are at the point where we're solving the next generation problems to get to market, and how do we operationalize, maintain, and deliver on those products.
Yeah, and those last mile problems of like solving the integration, etc., are less quote unquote sexy to talk about than the algorithm, so probably don't get as much attention, but it's the work that's needed. Last couple of minutes on this panel, so I'll maybe conclude by asking, if you could wave a bit of a magic wand and solve one problem tomorrow, or by the time you leave this conference, what would that be? In the interest of time, we'll say 10-word answers only, and then everybody can ask you in the in the networking time what you meant by that.
I'll start. I would say, hey, let's see, 10 words. Common global regulatory requirements that allow you to launch.
Look at that, tweet-worthy statement right there, or X-worthy statement. What do you think, Andreas?
It's a hard question, but just bringing it down a bit, I would love to see us at Traton and Scania, part of Traton, to have a really world-class CI/CD development in place. I mean, with a touch, with a blink of an eye, to really get the development speed going that we need moving ahead. But I don't have a magical womb, so it's going to be hard work instead.
CI/CD at the blink of an eye. All right. Apeksha?
I think it's going to be the validations and the right tool chain infrastructure to expedite that. And I think one of the things that has been quite a great support, I think, would be Applied's tool chain and things that we have been working. I think one of the things that has been kind of like a gating factor, as I had mentioned before, is around the being able to validate the kind of domain your systems are being deployed on with the right kind of infrastructure, even for subsystem testing. I think that has been one of the huge challenges for the AV industry, and I'll say for the ADAS as well. having the right set of tool chain that are adaptable to your process of development, that are adaptable to your process of your specific technology stack and how you're approaching it has been something that the industry has not been able to standardize or agree on. And having that kind of agile infrastructure that you are able to plug and play your systems with, I think if I had a magic wand, I would want that.
All right. I think you're asking me to dream, but how about an L4 technical solution that scales cost efficiently?
There you go. Get everything in that one 10-word statement. All right, we'll end on that optimistic note. Thank you so much for the panelists for the fantastic session here.